Downloadable content, also known as DLC for video games, became prevalent in the 21st century with the proliferation of internet, where additional content could be created and added to an already released game by the game's publishers themselves. And over the years, DLC has continued to evolve in many forms such as expansion packs, new levels, game modes, or even a whole new storyline. And the Gears of War series specifically has had its fair share of downloadable content. And after all of these years, this is the greatest additional content in the entire history of the Gears of War games, and for arguably a lot of reasons. And that DLC was for the third installment in the mainline Gears of War franchise, Gears of War 3: Ram's Shadow. The best DLC in the history of the entire Gears of War series has to be Ram's Shadow. Released on December 13th, 2011, Ram's Shadow was the second installment of downloadable content for the current Gears of War game at the time, Gears of War 3 by Epic Games. The DLC was an expansion pack that featured a new campaign mode, 6 new playable characters for versus and horde modes, a weapon skin, and new achievement trophies for players to increase their gamer score. When something brand new, especially a video game or a movie, etc., is released to the public, I for one want to get my absolute full money's worth out of it. When I bought and completed Gears of War 3, I was pretty satisfied for the most part. It had an enjoyable campaign, a not bad versus mode, and 2 satisfactory additional multiplayer modes, Horde and Beast Mode. And when DLC was coming to the game after launch, I for one was interested in the additional content, even though I kind of knew exactly what was coming. Multiplayer is the go-to when it comes to additional content in video games for the greater majority, such as adding new maps to play multiplayer modes on, adding new items such as weapons or new characters, and new cosmetics to play with. And when the first DLC for Gears of War 3 dropped, it wasn't too surprising that was typically what the game was going to get. And considering this form of DLC has been the template for the Gears of War game since the original Gears of War 2 and all of its aftercomers. But when Ram's Shadow was announced and released, that was a Gears of War DLC worth investing into. And for a basic $15 to $20 as a standalone or free with the game's season pass, it was a lot more than just a DLC. It was a whole new Gears of War gaming experience entirely.
This is it, people. Saddle up!
Ram's Shadow was a new campaign, a full complete story mode. This standalone expansion was a full extended storyline set prior to the first Gears of War game. The story of the DLC campaign takes place hours later after Emergence Day, the most defining event in the entire Gears of War universe. Players step into the shoes of new and familiar characters. The most central of them all is Michael Barrick, a classic Gears of War character from the Gears lore. That is, of course, if you read any of the Gears of War comics and graphic novels, but a brand new face to the series for those who've never strayed from the games themselves. In addition, the story brings back 2 fan favorites, Min Young Kim, the original leader of Delta Squad from Gears of War, Tai Kaliso, the great spiritual warrior from Gears of War 2, and introduced a brand new character to the Gears of War franchise, Alicia Valera, where the characters are enlisted together to help evacuate and protect COG's citizens from Alima City from an invading Krill storm, led and orchestrated by the greatest locust of all,
Ram, and I can't wait to meet him.
Despite being an expansion pack and new campaign for players, Ram's Shadow was a groundbreaking experience. For the first time, Gears players were able to explore both sides of the war. The campaign is told in a compact split narrative where players play and switch between the hero COG soldiers and the antagonist Locust. Even though this creative concept was technically already in Gears of War 3 when it launched with Horde and Beast mode, to experience it in a full campaign mode was incredible, and it benefited and really elevated its material. Tonally, it brings everything back to the first two and Judgment Gears of War games. It's harsher, daunting, gritty, and horrifying. Very similar to Gears of War 2's campaign that showed the true face of warfare and an edgy uncertainty. At its heart, Ram's Shadow is a story about a race against time. Michael Barrick and his squad, called Zeta 6, need to evacuate citizens from Alima City as quickly as possible, and along the way experience great terrors and setbacks, while giving players a sense of heart-pounding impending doom over the course of the few hours it takes to complete a playthrough, as the sky and the world over time slowly crowds with krill until at the end it feels like escape must be impossible. While the nearly invincible Rom and his powerful team of Locust guards devastate everything in their path, and the opportunities to play as General Rom himself, which was the main highlight of this DLC, partaking in his brutal gut-churning kill techniques, really added tension to the inevitable clash between both parties, in which you're forced to face off against this great monster and you know just how horrifying and dangerous he really is. So on top of that, along with being able to play as the main characters themselves from the campaign of this DLC and other modes, Gears of War players got more bang for their buck. Ram's Shadow was a great expansion with a campaign story and plot that was over-unique and satisfying for a Gears of War game. So let's take a closer look at the campaign and overall DLC of Ram's Shadow.
I'll tell you what the COG did for me. The COG blew up my house. The COG destroyed everything I had. And when I was stranded and had no other choices, the COG gave me a gun and sent me here to do the same thing to someone else.
The campaign is 5 chapters long, which if you are a veteran Gears of War player to the series and do the math, that is the length roughly of an entire act in a core Gears of War game. Some of you might think that's very lean to tell a full complete storyline in a campaign, but each chapter is pretty long and builds its setups and payoffs exceptionally well, with complete closure and no loose ends. In other words, you are fully satisfied at the end of your playthrough of the story and doesn't leave you hanging with a lot of questions. Each chapter in the campaign offers different series of small puzzles and challenges for players to overcome and explore. The level designing of each specific chapter forces players to hone their skills to beat them. Some levels force players to battle in massive open spaces of great verticality with sparingly available cover, while a couple levels force players to battle in very tight closed spaces where the fighting is too close for comfort. And every chapter in the campaign is pretty long, fun, and intense. On top of that, with both parties in the campaign covering the same ground, underlining excitement and tension that comes from knowing that they're just missing each other by moments, and you're aware it'll come to a head before the end. There is a nice variety of enemies to battle against as well, with the events that keep rolling the dice on you and are not repetitive and predictable. Most of the events in the campaign are familiar to those who played the first 2 original Gears of War games, but Ram's Shadow reapproaches them and really mixes them up, while delivering a dark, gritty, menacing environment from the beginning to the end. Now, of course, you can't have a good story without interesting characters, and Ram's Shadow has some really great ones. As I mentioned earlier, the story centers mostly on Michael Barrick, a corporal-rank soldier in the COG military, and the campaign story does a very good job of establishing and developing his character, especially for players that were new and unfamiliar to him, along with newcomer Alicia Valera, who also gets some nice beneficial spotlight as well. While Min Yun Kim, Ty Kaliso, and later Jay Stratton, who also makes an appearance in the campaign, serve as supporters. Ram's Shadow has an ensemble cast, and the story leans more towards a sense of collectivity and community. The drama is not single or central like the original Gears of War trilogy's main campaigns. Each character shares equal importance in the narrative, where the characters play off each other rather than off reality. The story does a flawless job maintaining consistency to the Gears of War fiction and never feels outlandish or dumbs itself down, and all the characters are very active, have great emotional investment, and push everything on their own volition.
Come inside! I've got to protect my own! You know how to use that thing, Kait?
One notable very good quality also about this DLC was its execution. Epic Games at the time wasn't planning on developing more Gears of War games after 3, so the decision to add an expansion, a new campaign built around the Gears of War lore, was a good call. And when you play through the DLC, you see and feel the inspiration and ingenuity put into the development, especially Chapter 3 of ROM Shadow Hide and Seek, which was possibly the best chapter of the campaign, where you explore an abandoned school looking for survivors, really elicits the terror it's going for, with nice small puzzling amounts of set-piece moments. While the level design is just filled with story all over the place, where you already have a pretty good idea what happened here or what's going to happen to you, but you have no idea when, and throughout the chapter you're constantly guessing and then they emerge on you. And if you love the nail-biting close quarters killing and action in Gears of War, you're getting the benefits here, and then some.
Centipedes!
Barret, giant it is!
ROM Shadow was a fabulous DLC, and after you play through it, you will be satisfied with the story, the chapters, the characters, the battles, the content, everything. This DLC made you feel like it was worth the price of admission for a Gears of War game, and ROM Shadow had plenty to return to after you've completed it. And for those of you who haven't played it or experienced it, I'm telling you, you are missing out. Especially if you're the kind of player that's looking for a new adventure to explore in Gears of War games, besides the core campaigns and not just multiplayer. So what did you think? What is more important or satisfying for Gears of War video game downloadable content? Is DLC like ROM Shadow not beneficial enough? Do you think this is the way for DLC for Gears of War games? Sound off in the comments. And until next time, this is Omaha, signing off.